Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, Sony Edition. And today we're going to be discussing the fourth film to be released as part of Sony's universe of Marvel characters, aka the Spider-Man superhero universe, Madam Web. And of course, since this is the character's first solo film, I should talk about my experience with her prior to seeing this movie. Now, my first exposure to Madam Web was, like Morbius, from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. And I was introduced to her, I think, through a series of episodes involving Doc Ock and Peter wanting to quit being Spider-Man, and with Madam Web contacting him and letting him know, no, you can't quit being Spider-Man, before sending him kind of on a quest to meet with a girl who is essentially meeting Spider-Man thanks to Make-A-Wish, and basically reigniting that spark in him that made him want to keep doing good and all that jazz. From there, I kept being exposed to her again, mostly through the 90s series, as I was able to check in with episodes where that happened after the ones that introduced her, where she would act as a side character for Spider-Man, guiding him, helping him out, trying to steer him in the right direction, and ultimately prepare him for some greater horror that he didn't know about, which was ultimately what led to the series finale, wherein Peter had to team up with multiple versions of himself in order to take down a version of him who was possessed by the Carnage symbiote. It's a whole thing, which I'm not going to get into, but the point is, it's through all that I was introduced to Madam Web. And basically, since that was my introduction to the character, I essentially just saw her as this great mystical figure who acted as kind of Spider-Man support, who it's connected to him because of their whole similar spider motifs, but ultimately she just felt like a guidance character, so to speak, essentially as the wise old sage that would guide the hero when he or she needs her, but otherwise though just tends to pull back and mind their own business until they actually have to step in. As such, after that, my next exposure to Madam Web was, well, through the game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, as she was the one who alerted Spider-Man to the whole reality is fractured thing when he accidentally destroyed the Tablet of Order and Chaos, and she essentially acted as the mission control for that game with all four of the Spideys that were featured there. And it's also through that game that I did learn a bit more about Madam Web and what her deal is in the comics. That she's not actually this high mystical being, she just has psychic powers and is hooked up to a life support system because because her body is completely paralyzed and she's blind. Put simply, it allowed me to learn more about her, and while it did kind of put her in a different light, considering that this showed that she wasn't as grand and mystical as I was shown off with the 90s Spider-Man series, it did allow me to get a better grasp of her character. And from that, but the thing is, after that, most of my exposure to Madam Web was, well, through her successor, as it turns out the title of Madam Web has been passed along from Spider-Person to Spider-Person. Specifically, the one I was aware of in the comics was the Julia Carpenter Madam Web, who took on the title after inheriting the powers from the original. And as such, she's a lot less immobile than her predecessor, but she does still have the same mystical what's-it, so it allows her to see the future, other possibilities, and all that jazz. But ultimately, even with her in the role, I only saw Madam Web as, well, a supporting character, someone who was definitely high up on the totem pole, but tended to pull back in favor of letting the people with the actual physical powers do most of the heavy lifting, while she was in the background guiding them and trying to point them in the right direction. So, while I think that she was a useful character, I also didn't see her as a leading character kind of person. And as such, when Sony announced that Madam Web was going to have her own solo film as part of their whole universe of characters, like many people, I was dubious. After all, it was already a stretch for having Morbius, and it's going to be a stretch again for the next character that's going to be coming up. So, Madam Web in a titular role, it could work, but it was also one I was doubtful of. It was not helped by when the trailers for the film came out, nobody really was looking forward to it. In fact, many people said the trailers looked like they were for a fan film than an actual movie, and as a result, people just kept thinking the film was going to suck. But the film was still on its way to to theaters, and of course the actors tried promoting it. There were occasional TV promos, and sure enough, 2 weeks ago on Valentine's Day, the film was put in theaters and it was critically panned. Apparently, yeah, the film was as bad as people said it was, but of course it was still connected to the whole greater Sony verse of Marvel characters, so of course I wanted to go see it for the sake of these vlogs, and I saw something there that I think I wasn't expecting. Was that thing good or bad, though? Well, that's what we're here to find out, as today we're going to be, of course, taking a look at Madam Web. And two things before we continue on. One, I took notes while watching the movie, so there are going to be times when I pull this notebook out and I, flip through the pages as I try to find whatever it is that I need to find in order to keep everything straight in this video. So, a heads up on that. Actually, three things. The second thing is, I have a puppy here by the name of Chindi Regina. She is adorable and she likes to interrupt the vlogs on occasion, so just a heads up. And finally, and this is a big one, by the time that I'm doing this video, like I said, the film has been out in theaters for 2 weeks. So, spoilers incoming. When I do my plot summaries, I reveal everything. Nothing is spared. So, if you haven't seen this movie yet and don't want to go unspoiled, turn away now, because I am not holding anything back. Are we good? Okay, we're good. Anyway, let's get to the long-ass plot summary. And the film actually begins in Peru, specifically in 1973, as we check in on a woman whose name is Constance Webb, as we see that she is on the hunt for a very particular spider, and she's given security by a man named Ezekiel Sims, who promised to help her because he wanted to find the spider himself. And he has his own reasons for wanting the spider, but Constance wants to find the spider because apparently the venom from the spider has some voodoo or muju or whatever, has something inside it that, if utilized properly, could be the solution to various medical breakthroughs and being even able to heal certain genetic disorders, which Constance is very much in need of because, well, she's pregnant, and spoilers for later in the movie, the only reason she's even doing all this is because it turns out her daughter was diagnosed with one of these neurological disorders and probably wasn't going to live long if she was born at all. So Constance wants to find this venom so she can find a way to cure her daughter so that she can go on to live a healthy life. However, her search throughout Peru has not really yielded much results, and Ezekiel is kind of getting impatient, to the point where during one of their searches he goes back to their camp and then just starts scrounging through Constance's notes, trying to find any leads on the spider. Well, as he does this, Constance hits a break, as she actually did manage to find one of these spiders and brings it right back to the camp. And of course, as she shows it off to everyone, everyone's like, "Oh, great, you found it, it's all good, this is gonna help so much," before Ezekiel comes out of the tent and shoots everybody. Yeah, obvious villain is obvious. He doesn't give a shit about medical practices or helping people. He just wants the spider venom because, well, it gives you superpowers. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Apparently there was a legend connected to the spider like I said, the venom does have some mystical what's-its going on with it, that it's utilized by a secret group of people called Las Arañas, and ultimately the spider venom is supposed to give them, like, unique abilities, like, spider powers, the standard stuff. Proportional strength, speed, and agility, clinging to walls, and actually another unique ability that's actually unique to this particular spider, a venom touch. A literal venom touch. Not the zappy kind you would expect from Miles Morales. No, this one is literal venom. You grab someone and you inject venom into their veins, and the longer you hold on to them, the more venom is pumped through their veins, until eventually, if you hold on long enough, it will kill them. And Ezekiel wants those powers. So much so, and as such, after he shoots everyone, he pretty much tells Constance, hand the spider over. She says, "No, I'm not doing it," and so that leads to a struggle, which ends with him shooting her, leaving her for dead, and running off with the spider. However, that's when help arrives in the form of, well, the aforementioned Las Arañas, who saw this whole thing and decided they wanted to intervene. As they go to Constance and decide they need to save her. As such, one of their warriors grabs her, and they all go to this weird, I guess, cave beneath a tree. As they let Constance rest in a pool of water, and end up bringing out another one of those spiders, which this one goes on to Constance, and, well, as you do with mystical spiders that grant you superpowers, it bites Constance, which, unfortunately does not save her, but it does allow her to live long enough that she's able to successfully give birth to her daughter, who the warrior that found her that the warrior that saved her does hold Constance's daughter, and tells Constance that her life won't be easy, but she will eventually seek answers, and when she does, he'll be there to help her. And so Constance dies in the water, leaving behind this daughter. As such, from there, the film cuts to years later in the year 2003 as we see Constance's daughter grown up, and it's here where we meet our main character of the movie, Cassandra Webb, or Cassie for short. She works as she works at a hospital, usually as an emergency worker, typically driving an ambulance, trying to resuscitate people, just all the stuff that you would expect from working in medical when doing medical stuff. And the film actually cuts to her as we see her and her partner, a man by the name of Ben Parker, as they're trying to rush a woman right to the hospital, though they encounter some turbulence on the way, as they almost run into a group of school kids, and when she tells one of the school kids to get out of the road, the girl ends up flipping Cassie off. But either way, Cassie manages to get the woman to the hospital, and this woman's family is so grateful for Cassie's help that her son ends up drawing Cassie a picture of their family, which at first Cassie doesn't want, but Ben pressures her into taking. Though it's clear the family isn't exactly happy, as the woman's stepdaughter wants to be there with her as she's in her hospital bed, but her father says, maybe she doesn't want to see you. You better stay out here. So yeah, that's clearly a loving family right there. But either way, as Cassie tries kind of rolling with it, she and Ben do end up stepping aside, and then we get some admittedly clunky exposition as Ben and Cassie talk with each other, express their relationships, the things they want to do, and but it also helps build their characters and where they are as people, as Ben even admits that he's seeing someone. And when Cassie starts probing him for details, he clams up. So Cassie's able to tell it must be serious. But ultimately, throughout all this, as Cassie and Ben continue having a little thing, Ben is able to talk Cassie into coming to a baby shower, because it turns out his sister-in-law, a woman by the name of Mary, is expecting. And, well, of course, when you're expecting, you want to celebrate it a little, and so Ben wants Cassie to come. Of course, Cassie doesn't want to come, because if she comes, she knows she's going to be talked into doing a bunch of party stuff, but Ben manages to get her to come to essentially agree. He gets Cassie to agree to it, so, well, that's all said and done. In the meantime, we now cut over to where Ezekiel Sims is now, and we see that he's doing a lot better. He actually is still doing very better, as we see him going to an opera concert and picking up a woman there, even bringing her back to his penthouse apartment, and as we see that he's gotten a little terrarium for the spider that he stole, and at which point, after he shows all this stuff up, he romances her, and they get to the sex. However, it turns out that Ezekiel is kind of dealing with some restless nights. Why? Well, as we learn later in the movie, because he stole the spider and it wasn't actually gifted to him, he's also cursed. So while he does have the standard array of spider powers that he wanted from the spider bite, well, it turns out that every night he has restless visions. Specifically, he has visions of 3 women breaking into his apartment, stealing his spider, and killing him. And these 3 women are, well, spider-themed superheroes. Specifically, we have 2 spider women and an Aranya. Pretty much throughout all this entire vision, Ezekiel tries fighting them off, but their combined teamwork ends up resulting in Ezekiel getting his ass kicked before he's thrown out of the apartment building and just falls to the street to die. And basically Ezekiel's been having that same vision for years, and he kind of wants to prevent it from happening, which is part of the reason why he's romancing this woman at all, because it turns out she's an NSA agent, and he wants access to her facial recognition software, which, if he can utilize properly, should be able to allow him to find these girls before they become a problem. And as such, after he exposits all this stuff to her, he ends up poisoning the NSA agent to get her password for the facial recognition software, and then just kills her anyway because he's obviously the villain. But either way, he gets access to her facial recognition software, and his underling, this woman whose name I genuinely do not remember, is able to plug it into his systems, and so they are pretty much plugged into the entire city, and they end up, and as such, utilizing Ezekiel's descriptions of the 3 women from his vision, they're able to get an idea of what the women would look like right now. And sure enough, all three of them are teenagers. They're all teenagers, which makes Ezekiel's underling hesitate, but Ezekiel's plan is to take these girls out now so they can't kill him later, so he doesn't give a shit if they're teenagers. So he mainly has this woman just keep an eye out for them. In the meantime, back with Cassie, we cut to her as she's back on the job as we see her and Ben dealing with a car pileup. And she and Ben end up going to this guy whose car is teetering on the side of a bridge. And while their efforts are able to help this man get out of his car before it flies off the side, well, that doesn't save Cassie, as when the car does eventually go over, she's stuck inside, and no one is able to pull her out before it goes sploosh. So, yeah, Cassie ends up going into the river, even banging her head on the windshield. And as we learn later, she does officially die for 3 minutes. However, as she has her near-death experience, that's when things get trippy for her, as she begins seeing what looks like light strands connected as a web, as she has weird visions and sounds of the future, things that have not happened, things that may have happened, things that will happen, all that jazz, and it's clear that it's just all over the map, and it's just trippy, weird, and insane, but it all eventually stops as thankfully Cassie is pulled out of the river, and Ben is able to resuscitate her. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. Shindy was being antsy, and I had to get her out of the room. But basically, yeah, after Cassie is resuscitated, she finds that things are starting to get a little weird. Specifically, she begins experiencing a strange form of deja vu, as while Ben's giving her a medical checkup, things just seem to repeat themselves as she goes through the whole medical procedure. He checks her oxygen level, and then it just resets, which Cassie seems to be the only one that notices this. So it starts getting weird to her, and then after that, when we see her again later, we see her go to the baby shower, and while at first things seem normal, everyone's just happy that she's alive at all, happy, yeah, they're all informal, all friendly. She eventually is suckered into going with Mary to all the baby names, which involve talking about your mother, which leads to some honestly clunky exposition again, which shows just how socially awkward that Cassie is. Eventually, throughout all this, as they're trying to guess Mary's baby's future name, again, the deja vu happens again, as things seem to repeat themselves, which Cassie finds a bit confusing, especially since she's the only one that seems to notice, but thankfully, she's pulled out of that affair. She's pulled out of that as Ben ends up coming in and saying that there's an emergency going on that requires medical professionals. So of course Cassie and Ben need to go deal with that. As they arrive on the scene of a warehouse fire as people are being wheeled out, and Cassie and Ben are doing their whole medical thing, as Cassie's trying to resuscitate a guy, trying to make sure that everyone's okay, and basically they're just trying to stay calm in the midst of an emergency. However, it's here where the visions continue on. Only these ones are a lot more graphic than the ones prior, as we see Cassie as she's trying to resuscitate a guy, only to see her boss, a man by the name of O'Neill, lying on the ground with Cassie's hands on his chest, both of them bloody, which just horrifies Cassie. But as it goes on, she keeps seeing more of these horrific visions, and of course the deja vu keeps getting worse, and Cassie begins to realize that her boss might be due to die soon. As such, as she starts coming back to reality, and her boss tries getting in an ambulance to get some backup, Cassie tries saying, hey, how about I drive for you? But he immediately just pushes her aside because she might still be dealing with some PTSD from her dive into the river yesterday. So he thinks that maybe that he should do this himself. He doesn't even get a block down the road before a truck rams into the ambulance he's driving, and he is subsequently killed, with Cassie feeling a mite guilty because she saw that happen, but couldn't do a thing to stop it. It's kind of mortifying in that sense, and as a result, after these events happen, Cassie does finally decide she needs to get herself checked out. She goes to the doctor, gets her eyes checked, and wants to know if there's any brain trauma, if there's any mental trauma, but She's got a clean bill of health. Everything seems to be fine. So she has absolutely no idea how she's having these visions at all. Her doctor just kind of chalks it up to some PTSD, and to try and help her cope with it, she pretty much just prescribes her a paid week off, which Cassie takes as she tries to kind of deal with all of these, deal with the PTSD of seeing her boss die, alongside the dealing with these visions. And which reality is still trying to knock at her door as Ben ends up trying to call her and tries inviting her to O'Neill's funeral, but she's still not wanting to come in. Again, Shindy came back in. Sorry about that. But immediately, Cassie is given some bit of is given some bit of hope with these premonitions, as while she's neatly just kind of doing around minding her own business, she has a vision of a pigeon that flies into her window and dies on impact. And while at first she thinks that this is a sign that the visions can't be changed, well, when she's brought back to reality and sees the pigeon hasn't flown into her window yet, she goes over to it and opens it up. And sure enough, when the pigeon flies in, it instead just flies into her apartment, alive and well. And thanks to her actions in the present, it has affected the pigeon. And so Cassie begins realizing that these powers don't show her predestined events. It's just showing possibilities, things that could happen. And this does kind of get Cassie out of her funk a little, as she decides that she might maybe want to go to O'Neill's funeral. As that she ends up going to a train train terminal, as she gets a ticket to a subway so she can go to said funeral. However, it's here where we get where Ezekiel continues his search, and sure enough, it's finally borne fruit, as he actually has managed to find all three of the girls who are set to kill him. And coincidence of all coincidences, all three girls are at the same train station that Cassie is on. And I'm just going to say their names right now, so let me just pull up the notes. These three girls are... Hold on, I'm just trying to find where I wrote it down, because I know I wrote it down. These three girls are a kind of nerdy girl by the name of Julia Cornwall, this punky kid by the name of Martha Franklin, Martha Franklin, and a Latina girl by the name of Anya Corazon. And like I said, all three of them are at the train terminal and are coincidentally board the same train that Cassie is on. And sure enough, as Ezekiel Sims' underling catches them, Ezekiel rushes to the location because, well, hey, all three girls exact right in one place? That's lucky. Better take advantage of that while you can. However, as Cassie is sitting on the train and waiting for it to go off, the visions start back up again. And like with when O'Neill was killed, they're starting to get a bit more graphic. And I do like how the visions are presented to us at these points in the movie. They're fragmented, only really showing pieces of the puzzle. Little things that let Cassie know that she is experiencing a vision. Like at one point when she sits on the train, she takes off her jacket, only to find that she's wearing it again, so she never really took it off. Or these people, or other passengers saying these certain things that are then repeating themselves. It is a very trippy and confusing scene, but it's a nice way of, I think, actually building tension. And sure enough, as she's sitting there, she has a vision of Ezekiel as he comes onto the train and just slaughters the three girls. It's just kind of fucked up and rather horrific. There's no blood, but it's just the way it's so callous and cold that it can still give you chills. And sure enough, as the vision fades and Cassie realizes what she saw, she starts getting scared, especially when she sees all three girls board the train. And while at first she tries to get off the train because she just wants to mind her own business, well, when she looks into a neighboring cart of the train she's on, she sees Ezekiel walking towards them, and she quickly realizes, oh shit, I gotta do something. As such, she immediately gets Anya, Julia, and Martha and tries getting them off the train, but of course, none of them want to just go with her, especially since they have absolutely no idea who this woman is. But she's able to rush them off one by one, stating that it's an emergency, even getting Martha to comply by stealing her skateboard before all four of them get off of the train, just before Ezekiel gets into their car. And so And so at least Cassie thinks that she can at least rest easy, that she saved these girls. But of course, the girls have absolutely no idea what the hell is going on. They have no idea that their lives are just saved by Cassandra here. And as Cassandra tries letting them know everything's okay, well, they see a group of police officers on the terminal they're at. And while at first Julia tries getting the cops' attention because essentially they're being kidnapped right now, Cassie has a vision of herself in handcuffs and says maybe that's not a good idea. And so, of course, the girls ask, what are you trying to protect us from? What's the emergency? Well, it turns out, I guess Ezekiel can just get off the train whenever he wants, because Cassie tells them that's the emergency, and all the girls turn around, and we see Ezekiel as we see in his supervillain attire. And believe it or not, this was actually one of the things that I was kind of wanting to see from the movie, because, well, like I said, Ezekiel allowed himself to be bitten by one of those mystical spiders from Peru. And of course, that means he gets spider powers. His costume, it's essentially a dark Spider-Man costume. I mean, it's not like note to note the same as Spider-Man, as his costume is mostly black with maybe like red lines just all across it, maybe vaguely resembling a spider on his chest, but it's mostly just there to look threatening. But the iconography is there. The body shape looks like Spider-Man's costume, the mask looks like his costume, the eye holes even are the same teardrop eye holes that you would expect from Spider-Man. So, believe it or not, this is something I was really looking forward to. The idea of an evil Spider-Man, having a lot of the web had similar powers, but none of that sense of responsibility, wanting nothing more than to cause harm and hurt people. I dig that. And honestly, I like the design for his costume. I like the whole red. I'm a sucker for red and black. And so, and continuing on from the fact that he's supposed to be an evil Spider-Man, it makes sense that he would adopt some of the iconography that we would most associate with a webhead, but still kind of keep it his own. So I at least like so I actually do think that as a concept, Ezekiel as an evil Spider-Man was cool. Too bad Ezekiel isn't, but we'll get to that when I get to my tell you my thoughts on the movie. Point is, Ezekiel has put on his Spidey jammies, and he's now actively hunting these girls as he's crawling along the ceiling towards them. And so the instant that these three teenage girls see the guy in the black and red spider suit, they immediately realize, okay, maybe we should run. As they and Cassie manage to make their way into another subway before getting off in a separate terminal, and likewise, they end up running into police officers there. Well, at first, Cassie tries telling them the situation's under control. The officers try and arrest Cassie, saying that she's under arrest, and while the girls try and tell them, no, she's all good, the police officers say, no, it's okay, you're all safe now, before Ezekiel catches up with the group and then starts killing the officers one by one. Thankfully, the police didn't get Cassie completely in her handcuffs, so she's able to get out of them, and so as Ezekiel is slaughtering police officers, the four women manage to make their way out of the subway as they realize they need to get away from Ezekiel as quickly as possible, resulting in Cassie and the trio of girls going into a cab and, well, hijacking it and driving off. As such, the girls want answers to what the heck's going on, but Cassie is just as clueless as them. The only reason that she knows that Ezekiel is a threat at all is because her vision warned her that he would be a threat. So she has absolutely no idea why Ezekiel is hunting these girls or what makes them so special. Point is, she knows these girls are in danger, and while Cassie wants to wipe her hands of these girls, she's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because when she says, hey, I'll just drop you kids off at your homes, none of them want to go home, as apparently all of their parents are out for whatever reason, and ultimately essentially all of them have nowhere to go. Martha says her parents are out of town, Anya says her parents are out of town, and Julia said she was going to go spend some time with her parents, that she was going to go away from home and spend the night at her friends. So yeah, it's looking like things are getting bad. Made worse by the fact that as Cassie is listening to the radio in the taxi, she does hear a police bulletin, or at least a news broadcast about what happened to the girls, but there is no mention of Ezekiel at all. Rather, it's the news broadcast seems to think it's Cassie who kidnapped the girls and are telling everyone to keep an eye out for her. As such, Cassie realizes whether she wants to or not, she needs to stay with these girls because they're the only ones that actually saw the guy in black and can confirm his existence, meaning that they're also her alibi for why she has not been actually kidnapped them. So, yeah, they're all essentially stuck together. In the meantime, Ezekiel is wondering why the hell he couldn't just kill those girls, but ultimately his right-hand woman tells him that she's going to keep an eye out for them, and so while Ezekiel just keeps kind of throwing a hissy fit. In the meantime, Cassie managed to bring the girls out to the woods, and they kind of set up a makeshift camp as they all try to get their bearings together and figure out what the hell they need to do next, especially with Ezekiel on their tails. As such, the three teenage girls ask Cassie how she knew that Ezekiel would do what he did, and Cassie confirms that she can see the future, though she can't completely control it. So she really has absolutely no idea what she's. Essentially, like I said, she's essentially just flying by the seat of her pants here and doesn't really know what to do. As such, while the girls are dubious to continue going along with this, at the same time, they saw Ezekiel and saw what he was capable of. So they're all kind of in no position to argue with Cassie about any of this. But in the meantime, though, as they begin talking, the conversation does shift to Ezekiel himself, and all three of them confirm that yes, Ezekiel was climbing on walls, which shouldn't be physically possible. But the way he moved, the way he operated, it was like he was a human spider, a spider person. Yeah, they don't call him Spider-Man. It's dumb. But that actually stirs something in Cassie's mind, and as such, she tells the girls to stay there, and basically the only thing she gives them to eat is jerky from the cab. As Cassie gets into said cab and drives in the city. Specifically, she goes back to her apartment building, and upon arriving, she of course takes the tabs off the car so that it can't be identified, and so she manages to sneak in through the fire exit into her apartment. And the thing is, earlier in the movie, we had seen Cassie at her apartment after she had clocked out after she and Ben had their little talk. And the thing is, after Constance gave birth to Cassie, or died giving birth to Cassie, well, Cassie grew up in the foster system. She never really had a place to call her own, and while she does still have some fragments of her mom's life, she's never really known her. And I question. I'll give some flack to the movie on this. I'm kind of wondering how the hell Cassie has any information, because the thing is, she's got like a whole briefcase of research that her mom left, all these little notes about what she was doing, her medical stuff and so forth. Hell, she even put the picture that kid gave her into said suitcase. And likewise, she just kind of, and I'm just kind of wondering how she got access to them at all, because I'm kind of wondering how anyone would realize that Cassandra and Constance were related. I'm guessing that maybe when she got old enough, she started looking into it because she maybe wanted to know something about her mom. But I still think that it would be an uphill process, especially if she had no idea who she was. Although I'm guessing that the Las Arañas warrior that said that he would be there when Cassie came back for answers probably brought her to civilization, got her registered, got her maybe send her back to America. I don't know. He could have easily gotten everything in order, but it still feels iffy that she'd be able to get anything on her mom at all. So, I'm gonna kind of call that a plot hole. But pushing that aside, the thing is, Cassie manages to go through all of her mom's notes, and sure enough, there are notes of her on her trip to Peru, specifically involving the spider she was looking for. And yes, according to the notes, when someone was the spider venom is supposed to give someone like the proportionate strength, speed, and agility of a spider, plus the ability to cling to walls, which Cassie begins wondering, maybe I can do that too. At which point she just kind of slides off the wall and falls under her ass. It's slightly amusing. But however, as Cassie looks through the notes, she does notice one ability that these spiders are supposed to give that does coincide with her. Namely, a spider's sixth sense that's supposed to briefly warn them of events that are to come. Which, believe it or not, I kind of like that that's the explanation for Cassie's future vision. As essentially, basically all these visions she's been having, it's an augmented spider sense. And I dig that. It's been showcased in the comics before that if the spider sense is refined enough, it could allow you to see the future. We saw that with one version of the webhead known as the Assassin Spidey, whose spider sense was refined so great that he just knew things were going to happen. And hell, even going to the main timeline in the comics, one of Spider-Man's clones, Kane, had a spider sense that was so augmented that he could actually see things in the future. So I kind of like the idea that Cassandra's psychic powers are just an augmented spider sense, but I dig it. But either way, while this does give Cassie answers as to who she is, it still doesn't explain who the guy in black, who doesn't explain who Ezekiel was. Although she does start getting answers while she's looking through her mom's notes, she does happen to find a picture of her mom and Ezekiel, and sure enough, she recognizes that, hey, that's the guy I was on the subway. So she knows that whoever this guy in black is, he's tied to her mom. In the meantime, back with the teenage girls, they do what all teenage girls do and get bored. They're hassling each other, giving each other a hard time, while also trying to socialize and grow closer. And basically throughout this whole thing, Martha is getting kind of stir crazy and decides, hey, they saw a cafe down the road and they're already out of beef jerky because apparently Martha ate it all. And as such, Martha's able to talk Julia and Anya into going with her down to the cafe, which at first Julia and Anya aren't completely okay with this, especially since they know Ezekiel's out there and Cassie told him to stay put, but ultimately Martha's able to talk the two girls into going to said cafe, and so the three of them head there and they decide, okay, we'll just order something and then we'll leave. And so they all go to said cafe, or sit down in the front to order some food, but as the three of them are chowing down, Martha sees a group of jocks sitting in the corner, and because she's a teenage girl who wants attention, she just starts going over there and socializing, and as you do, things get more rowdy as immediately she wants to show off. She wants to dance to the music in the cafe, and she manages to get Julia and Anya to join in on her, to the point where all three of them are dancing on the table. Well, it's at this point that Cassie returns to the campsite and realizes that the girls are gone, and she manages to follow their footprints all the way to the cafe. And as she finds all three girls just grooving and dancing on the table, she just gets annoyed at them and tells them that they need to go. Unfortunately, though, as the trio of young ladies was dining at said cafe, one of the patrons of the diner recognized them as the girls who were kidnapped earlier that day and called the police. And sure enough, thanks to the technology that Ezekiel stole from that NSA agent, his right-hand woman picks up on the call, and Ezekiel's able to intercept it and learn where the girls are. And so sure enough, as Cassie is here to get the girls, Ezekiel walks into the diner dressed back in his Spidey jammies, at which point he just starts slaughtering everyone. The diner patrons, the girls, and as Cassie tries going in to stop Ezekiel, he ends up stabbing her with a knife. Or at least, he would. As it turns out, all this is a vision. When Cassie arrived on the campsite, apparently the vision occurred, and she realizes that if she doesn't get to that cafe right now and do something, Ezekiel's gonna arrive on the scene and kill those girls. And sure enough, back in the diner, we see the girls as they're getting more and more introduced to the team of jocks in the corner. But Cassie is able to thankfully get into the taxi and just kind of immediately cruise right to the cafe. And sure enough, as the three teenage girls are dancing, all of them immediately stop as they see Ezekiel arrive on the scene, as they realize, oh shit, he's gonna kill us. Before Cassie just bursts right through the front door of the cafe, taxi in full, and she actually smacks right into Ezekiel. It's funny, and spoilers, that's not the first time in this movie he gets hit by a car. It's actually kind of amusing, and it's the first indicator that apparently he doesn't have a spider sense. So, maybe he should have taken the spider proper. But the point is, evil Spider-Man is incapacitated, and so Cassie tells the three girls to get in the taxi, they gotta get out of here. Though Ezekiel doesn't manage to get a lick in, as he manages to grab Cassie's hand and inject her with some of the venom, but she's able to knock him aside with a car door before she and the girls drive away. And while Cassie rightfully chews the girls out for being stupid and reckless, the girls do say they feel sorry, though Cassie is so angry that she just can't talk to them right now. In the meantime, as Ezekiel recovers from his humiliation, he calls his right-hand woman and wants to know where the hell the girls are and who this woman is that's helping them. And ultimately, his right-hand woman is able to tell him It's Cassandra Webb, the daughter of Constance Webb. And sure enough, this does manage to get enough gears in Ezekiel's head turning as he realizes the connection between this woman and the lady he killed several years prior. So, yeah, there's our kind of sort of connection between them now. I guess. I don't know. I'll get to that later. Point is, Cassie managed to bring the trio of teenage girls to a motel and gets them a room, and her intent is to just kind of leave, and again, she wants to go back to plan A. Just ditch the girls, call their parents or the cops, and while she just has to go off and try and get all this thing sorted with the law. Unfortunately, it turns out the girls were kind of fibbing earlier about their whole parentage situation. As it turns out, none of them are in good places at home. When it comes to Martha, while her family is loaded, her parents don't really like the fact that they had a kid, as they blame her for ruining their lives and tend to not really spend a lot of time with her, opting instead to just travel the world and leave Martha at home. In the case of Julia, well, her dad divorced her mom, and her mom couldn't take it, and she basically had a mental breakdown and was admitted to a psych ward. And as a result, Julia got sent to live with her dad, and her dad's new family want nothing to do with her. It's part of the... Because here's the thing. Something I forgot to mention. All three of these girls do have connections with Cassie, and Julia was actually the stepdaughter of the woman that Cassie drove to the hospital at the beginning of the movie. And basically, Cassie just has no relation, and basically Cassie's whole thing with her family, it's just very strenuous, and that's part of the reason why she was even at the train station at all, because she thinks that they don't love her, and she thinks the only time they'll notice that does anything happen to her is if she ran away, which is why she was at the train terminal. And likewise, in the case of Anya, how her relationship to Cassie is that, well, she lives in the same apartment building as her. And likewise, I love how she even points out that Cassie leaves all of her junk mail down in the lobby that everyone else has to clean up. But the thing is, Anya lives alone. Apparently, her dad was an illegal immigrant, and 6 months prior to the movie, he got arrested and deported, leaving Anya behind. As such, Anya for the last 6 months has been doing everything in her power to not be found out, because the thing is, she's still underage, and until she turns 18, she is not considered a legal citizen. So she just kind of wants to stick everything out until she turns 18. But if Cassie calls the cops, then they'll grab Anya and send her to Mexico as well, or wherever her dad came from. I don't know, maybe Mexico, probably Mexico. Point is, as Anya herself says, until she turns 18, she cannot exist. So yeah, Cassie realizes she's still stuck with these girls. Also, if you're wondering how Martha was connected to Cassie, she was the kid that flipped Cassie off when she was driving Julia's stepmom to the hospital. So, as such, Cassie really has no idea what to do here. She doesn't think that she can properly take care of these kids, and likewise, she has absolutely no idea how to fight Ezekiel or deal with what all these strange powers he has. And as such, while she and the girls do end up spending the night at the motel, during the night, Cassie has another vision. One where she leaves the motel and goes back to the cafe where they had their encounter with Ezekiel. And sure enough, the combination, I'm supposing, of Cassie's psychic powers and the venom that Ezekiel injected into her, she actually does have a telepathic communique with Ezekiel, as he lets her know the whole reason why he wants to kill these girls, since in the future, they're all supposed to get powers, and they're all destined to kill him, so he wants to kill them first. And as such, Cassie tries reasoning with him, telling him he shouldn't do this, but Ezekiel just tells her to hand the girls over, if he doesn't, he'll kill her too, that she has nothing to be involved in this, blah, blah, blah. It's basically just stay out of my way or die, the typical villain shtick. And so, yeah, Cassie begins realizing that she really cannot abandon these girls, much as she doesn't want to be involved. As such, the next morning, after she informs the girls about Ezekiel's power, she gives them some light CPR training, because, well, if the venom gets into them, they'll need to learn how to use that in order to jumpstart someone's heart, since if the venom gets far enough, it will stop your heart. But likewise, she also lets the girls know about her mom's connection to Ezekiel, and how how Cassie's mom was in Peru studying the spider venom. As such, that the girls are able to put two and two together and realize that if they want any advantage over Ezekiel, then they need to get more information on what Cassie's mom was studying, which means that Cassie has to go to Peru, which I think is a little suspect considering that she's a wanted woman, but whatever. Point is, she has to get to Peru, and since she can't clearly take all the girls with her, especially since if they're seen in public, Ezekiel will be on them like flies on shit. So she immediately manages to call for help. I'm assuming that she's had a pager since working at the hospital, and that's how she contacted Ben, because I'm guessing if she used the phone, then again, Ezekiel, fly, shit. You get my point. Either way, she manages to somehow contact Ben, and so he has Ben essentially board up the girls for a week, and, well, coincidence of all coincidences, Ben is staying with Mary since her husband is off in another country doing God knows what, and so basically Ben takes these three girls back to Mary's house while Casey manages to book a flight to Peru, and sure enough, when she does eventually get to Peru, which the way the film makes it look like she got there in an afternoon, but they do state in the movie that it took a week to get to Peru and back. She does either way. Like I said, she gets to Peru and she does manage to follow in the footsteps of her mother before she eventually runs into that warrior from Las Arañas. Only now he's actually looks like a regular guy, as he's wearing regular clothes, he's grown out a beard, and he's not dressed in tribal things, which, yeah, the Las Arañas warriors had red paint covering their bodies and had vines that looked like webs. They essentially just looked like tribal Spider-Men. It's weird. Very, very weird. Oh, that's good. But either way, Cassie's able to talk to this man about what the hell's going on with Ezekiel, and yeah, he does confirm about this whole spider powers thing, and that Ezekiel is doing all this because he was cursed because he stole the spider instead of having the power be given to him, and blah 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 blah. Basically, throughout this conversation, though, the man brings Cassie back to the place where her mom died and where Cassie was also born. And part of the reason he's bringing her here is because, well, he wants to help Cassie get a better control of her powers. As yes, while she is still able to see the future, as we've been seeing throughout the movie, she's having a very hard time controlling it, as the visions just only happen when danger is about to erupt or something surprising happens. So if she wants to get better control of the powers, as this man puts it, she needs to reconcile her past. And so while Cassie's a little hesitant, he does manage to give her the metaphorical shove, and literal shove, as he pushes her spirit into the water, and Cassie begins having visions of the past, specifically of her mother as she was studying the spiders. And the thing is, Cassie her whole life did not know about the reason why Constance even went to Peru to study these spiders. However, as she has the visions, that's of course when she sees her mom talking to the doctor about how Cassie was supposed to have this neurological disease, but the thing is, Cassie never had that disease. She's fine. Which means that when that spider bit Constance just as she was dying, the venom did in fact cure Cassie. So yeah, Cassie quickly realized that her mom went through all that because she wanted to heal her daughter, and I guess through the power of mystical spider totem whatevers, they're able to actually she and her mom managed to make up in the vision stuff as they hug, which again, I guess is something that actually happened. So, because again, mystical whatsits, and as such, this gives Cassie an emotional clarity that she arrives back to the present as she meets back up with the guy who brought her here. Unfortunately, though, while this does allow her to get better control of her powers, Ezekiel is still a problem, because the thing is, while Cassie may have inherited the whole future sight thing from the spider bite, well, Ezekiel has all the other stuff that come with the powers. He can jump from building to building. He's got the agility. He's got the clinging to walls. He's got a venom touch. The thing is, Cassie cannot fight him. If she going toe to toe with him, she'd get her ass kicked. That's something fierce. But the guy is able to assure her that the thing is, her powers are greater than even she thinks. And he mentions that one potential power is that if she can master these abilities, it can literally allow her to be in multiple places at once. And so he tells Cassie, and I kind of do like that, and I do like this line, and I did write it down as it's actually a pretty good, as I do think it's actually a pretty good line. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on, where is it? I know I wrote it down. Where is it? Here it is. He actually tells Cassie that with her ability to see the future, that she's the only one that can do that. And he ends up saying this, and when he says, and this is the line he says when he tells her about this: "When you take on the responsibility, great power will come." Honestly, I dig it. It's a nice variant on the "great power, great responsibility" line, and as such, this gives Cassie more confidence as she ends up making her way back to America. In the meantime, though, back in America, basically for the last week, Ben and Mary have been doing their best to kind of keep the girls happy, and for the most part, they're living comfortably, watching movies, eating popcorn, and just doing all the things that a teenage girls are supposed to do. However, as the girls and the Parkers are just sitting in one night and watching a movie, Mary's water breaks. And as a result, she needs to get to the hospital stat because regardless of wherever she is, she's gonna have a baby. And so ultimately, while Ben does call an ambulance, it's not gonna get there in time. So Mary, and the girls have to pile into Ben's car so they can get to the hospital. Unfortunately, though, as they're driving to the hospital, Martha happens to be spotted by a camera in the street. And, well, that's when Ezekiel's right-hand woman gets a glimpse of her. And, well, the thing is, Ezekiel has been keeping an eye out for these girls the last week, and he got very impatient. I don't know why he wasn't looking at anything related to Cassie, because he clearly knows that Cassie's trying to protect them, but whatever. Let's say he has tunnel vision. I don't know. Point is, this gives him the lead he wants, and so he quickly realized, and so his right-hand woman's able to give Ezekiel, like, where they're going, the route they're taking, and so Ezekiel decides he wants to head them off and just kill them all in one fell swoop. In the meantime, as Ben and co are making their way to the hospital, Cassie arrives back at Mary's house, but she misses Ben, Mary, and the girls by a messy minutes. And so, sure enough, as she wanders around the house wondering where the heck everyone is, she once again gets a vision. And it's a vision of Ezekiel in his Spidey jammies blowing everyone up with a hand grenade in the middle of the city. So, she needs to act fast, and as such, she manages to, I guess, grab an ambulance. I don't know. I was looking at the screen when that happened, and as such, she tries rushing to the area, and Ezekiel is ultimately able to stop Ben's car by having his right-hand woman kind of hack into the security for all the traffic lights and turn them all green. And so, sure enough, with all lights green, it of course causes a traffic jam, which gets Ben's car secured, and well, that's when Ezekiel arrives, jumps onto the hood of their car, and once again has the hand grenade ready to blow them the hell up. However, thankfully, that's when Cassie arrives as she plows right onto the scene. And what I love is that as she drives right up, she crashes right off of she flies right off a building with the car. And Ezekiel sees it and he tries getting out of the way, but all this really does is just ram him right into the front of the ambulance and knocks him aside. Again, I guess cars are his just natural enemy. Who knew? Well, the point is, this managed to knock Ezekiel away, just deactivated the grenade, and the grenade wound up going over to an empty car. So, there's an explosion, but nobody gets hurt. Well, except for the guy who lost his car. Sucks to be him. But ultimately, Cassie's able to get Martha, Anya, and Julia into the ambulance and tells Ben that he needs to get Mary out of here. His target is the girls, after all, so if Ben and Mary are nowhere near them, he won't be after them. So immediately, as Ben and Mary go off, Cassie and the girls immediately go off themselves and have to try and find somewhere that they can shake Ezekiel off. Unfortunately, though, Ezekiel recovers rather quickly from his tumble as he starts chasing after the group. Spider jumping from car to car to get to them, which it's not very secretive, dude. But then again, maybe that's what the costume's for. But ultimately, thankfully, through the power of a defibrillator, Cassie's able to get him off the ambulance, just throws him into another car. Again, I guess car is natural enemy. But unfortunately, the jolt also shorts out the ambulance as they drive through a tunnel. As such, Cassie is able to successfully use her future vision to see a vision of the girls going to soda factory and getting lifted away by a chopper. And so, as such, with that in mind, she's able to call in said chopper and alert and get the girls to said warehouse. And as such, using her vision, using her power, she's able to set up a trap for Ezekiel. She has the girls line the whole warehouse with explosives, and sure enough, when Ezekiel arrives, they time it all perfectly so that they can get around him and then just set them all off and cause enough of a commotion that Ezekiel can't zero in on them. And even amidst all the chaos, as things blow up, a wall gets blown up, and that allows the girls an escape route, which allows them to get to stairs, which lead them to the roof. And so it looks like escape is right there, but again, the explosions. They are apparently a lot more disastrous than even Cassie foresaw, as the explosions actually start spreading to the roof and start tearing things apart, resulting in the chopper saying that if they want to pick these girls up, then they need to get them out of here as quickly as possible. As such, Cassie's able to use her spider sense, pretty much, to evade all these threats so that the three teenager girls can get out scot-free, but unfortunately, Ezekiel is still after them and even manages to make it to the roof. And while Cassie's powers are able to stop the girls from being hit by a stray rocket, one of those rockets ends up hitting the chopper, which Ezekiel knocks into it, which also means that there's no escape route now. The girls are now trapped with Ezekiel, and Ezekiel just starts zeroing in on Cassie since she's the one that's been consistently getting in the way of his plans, so he wants to off her so that she can no longer be a problem. And while the three girls do try to defend Cassie, as Ezekiel keeps trying to poison her or knock her aside, he keeps punting them away as they all fly into parts of the destroyed building, hanging onto girders, holding on to things, just basically all holding on for dear life, and they're all in peril, and even if Cassandra manage to recover, she can only save one of them, which is even Ezekiel points out. However, Cassie manages to finally accept the responsibility of her role, I guess, and in turn that gives her such a great sense of power that it allows her to access the whole being in multiple places at the same time thing, as she sends out, I guess, phantom images to save the girls and stop them from getting hurt. At which point Ezekiel sees this, gets pissed off, and punches her real body, which sucks her copies in, though they did save the girl, so hey. And as such, Ezekiel just keeps telling Cassie she should have backed out, she could have just walked away, but Cassie, as she's being backed up, ends up getting next to this big Pepsi Cola sign on the building, and she begins realizing that she knows how to beat this guy, as she immediately just starts backing up in the building with Ezekiel just closing in on her, just wanting Cassandra dead for all the crap she's put him through, but she continues talking to Ezekiel about how he went through all this because he wanted to avoid his death, but ultimately it's not the girls that would bring his end about. It was Cassie, and sure enough, as all the explosions continue rocking the building, it ends up shaking the board, and Cassie manages to get Ezekiel just in the right position so that girders end up falling on him. And, well, while Peter Parker, when put in a similar position, was able to find the strength to push those things off, Ezekiel is powered by hate and not by the love of others, and so he can't get these girders off, and so sure enough, as the sign gets shaken, it immediately just throws Ezekiel right off, and it lands him to the ground below, which isn't enough to kill him, but the sign is, as before Ezekiel can fully recover, part of the Pepsi Cola sign ends up getting shaken and crashes right on top of him. So, evil Spider-Man is now dead. Unfortunately, though, Cassie is also in danger, as she was near the sign when it went flying off, and so while she tries to get to safety, sadly, she's rocketed around too, and ultimately the sign ends up falling off the building, and she crashes into the nearby river, and I'm guessing the force of the impact combined with everything that she went through, including more poison that Ezekiel pumped into her, kind of keeps her from not moving. And sure enough, the fireworks are still going on in the cola factory. And sure enough, one of them ends up flying into the water and ends up hitting Cassie right in the eyes, blinding her. So, yeah, it doesn't look like she'll be getting out of this. Thankfully, though, the girls have managed to recover, and they see that Cassie's in danger, and they manage to jump into the Hudson and pull her out, managing to give her CPR and revive her. So, well, the good guys do win. And hey, and as a special bonus, we even cut back to the hospital, as Mary does manage to give birth to a healthy baby boy. And while we never hear his name, it's very heavily implied that it's Peter Parker. So, good on them. In the meantime, though, Cassie is also in the same hospital, and basically the three girls are by her bedside 24/7 as she's recovering, and she pretty much just tells them, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you girls, and likewise the girls say the same thing about her, and while one nurse comes in and asks if the girls are immediate family, they all confirm, yeah, they pretty much are. And so, yeah, they're all just happy to be with each other and support one another. And sure enough, while Cassie never fully recovers from this ordeal, her sight does not come back the way it did before, and she's now confined to a wheelchair. She does still find ways to continue on. As the movie cuts ahead to later, as we see that she's gotten a brand new apartment that's like a that they have to get to an elevator to climb into. It's got a big window, and while Cassie's vision has not returned in the way it used to, she still has her precognitive abilities, and she's gotten a lot better at using them, as she can now predict things that are happening around her, little things that happen, as when Anya, Julia, and Martha come by with food, she's able to figure out what food it was. She tells Anya bless you before she even sneezes, and then likewise. The girls ask her how her vision is, and she says that, yeah, it's better than ever, as she is still seeing visions of the future. And sure enough, the visions she's seeing are of these three girls grown up and adopting their own spider-themed personas, as we see them all kicking ass, fighting crime, and doing it in their own unique ways. And sure enough, as they're all doing this, we end up seeing a future version of Cassie, as we see her fully evolved into her position as we see her in her Madam Web costume in the future, floating behind the girls as they're standing over New York ready to protect it, and likewise we see the same spider that Ezekiel had just crawling around Cassie's hand, and ultimately the film ends as Cassie in the present and the future smiles at the audience, let them know that the future is always changing, but it's always something unique and interesting, and the best part is it hasn't happened yet. And so there's hope for the future as we know it's in the right hands. So yeah, that's Madam Web. Took an hour to get through the plot, but that's Madam Web, and my thoughts on it? Let me put it this way. Objectively, I don't think this can be technically called a good movie. There is a lot wrong with it, and even I can't deny that it's clunky in a lot of areas. But here's the thing. I kinda liked the movie. And I don't mean that in the sense of it's so bad it's good. I mean, like, legit, unironically, I liked the movie. I mean, okay, let me put it this way. First, let me explain why I think objectively the movie isn't good. Because there is plenty in this movie that you can call out if you were so inclined. And there's plenty of stuff that even when I went back to watch the movie for this vlog, that I noticed and just kind of went, ooh, that didn't look good. And, well, first, let's start with the villain. Like I said, in concept, Ezekiel Sims sounded like a character that I would like. Like I said, the idea of an evil Spider-Man appeals to me. And like I said, I like that Ezekiel essentially co-opted the iconography that you would associate with the webhead in his Spider-Man costume. I liked that, and like I said, I liked the idea of having someone with all of Spider-Man's powers and abilities, but with none of the responsibility. And I'll give credit to where it's due. When we see Ezekiel actually acting with his spider powers, he is not what you would expect from Spider-Man. He's not quippy, he's not joking, he's not having fun while he's doing this. He's like a cold-blooded machine, wanting nothing more than to kill and destroy anything he sees as a threat. Like, in each of the visions where he actually anytime in the film where he's actually killing people, or in the visions when he's actually going after the girls, he is not stopping for a second. He is an expert at the powers and just goes right for the kill immediately. He is not holding back. He just wants someone. If he wants someone dead, then there's nothing in his power. There's nothing that can stop him from getting there. So in concept, I think he's cool. Sorry, I was thirsty. But as an execution, I didn't like him at all. I think his motive, I don't really kind of get him as a character. Like, I don't really understand what his motivation is for why he wants to be in power that he is. After all, like, the most we get out of him is that apparently he had to struggle for everything he had. He has to fight and claw his way to the top every single day of his life, but we don't really see that. We already see him when he's super successful. We don't see him as he's struggling. We see him now as an asshat who apparently is rich enough to act as security for this random scientist lady who went to Peru to study spiders, but then killed her and all the people that came with because he wanted these super awesome spider powers that came from said spider. To which I respond with, why does he need the spider powers? He seems to be doing well by himself. And hell, when we pop in on him in the present day, or the present day of 2003, he seems to be doing a lot better he's doing well. He's built an entire company for himself. So I don't really understand why having spider powers would suddenly rise him above everybody else. Is it just because he wants to stick to walls? Does he want to be like a corporate raider? Does he want to do what Alchemax want to do with their Spider-Man in the first issue of Spider-Man 2099? Which, don't know if you don't know, Alchemax is an evil corporation that wanted to make their own corporate raider Spider-Man. My point is this: why does he want to be an evil Spider-Man? What does he get from being able to cling to walls and having the agility? Because yes, I admit, the whole spider powers are appealing, and I openly admit if I had them, I would be web-slinging a lot of places, but I don't see what he needs them for. Why does he want them? And there are probably better power sets that he could have taken, so why the spider powers? I don't get it. I feel like the only real thing that'd be appealing to him as a villain would probably be the poison touch, but again, that's very selective, and quite frankly, if he started using that more on his enemies, I think it would point to him being the one who poisoned him. Before anyone says, well, there are no puncture wounds, there's no way that he could have done it. Well, the thing is, he's got like I said, he's got a fucking terrarium where that spider is in his apartment. So I feel like that someone is going to start connecting the dots, is what I'm saying. And even if they can't actively prove that he was the one that did it, I feel like there would be enough of a corporate backlash from it that whatever he built would be torn down. Although, maybe he targeted them too. Maybe that's why he has the Spider-Man costume. So that even if anyone did look at any of his activities, he could just go in and kill them anyway, which I think would just make him look more suspicious. My point is this: it makes no sense why he would do any of the things he does in this movie. I don't really understand why he wants the spider, how he struggled all of his life, why he needs to be in this position of power that he is. Because ultimately, I don't really see the appeal of having all this power and then deciding, I want to be able to cling to walls too. It doesn't really make sense. It's literally and ultimately, the only real thing that we see, his only real motivation throughout the movie is just that he has vision, is that he's targeting these three girls because he keeps having nightmares that these three girls in the future will kill him when they eventually all get superpowers. So in that regard, I can understand that, but I just don't understand Ezekiel as a character. I don't really get him. I don't really like him. And if I can just get into a meta sense, I don't like his actor. I mean, I don't hate his actor. I don't know his actor personally. For all I know, his actor could be a great guy, and I don't know, and I hope he's doing well for himself. But as Ezekiel Sims has not acted well. From his very first scene, his inflections all feel off. None of them really feel genuine. All of them just feel haphazard. It feels like nothing was refined, nothing was done well, and all of his deliveries are just garbage. And I don't like saying it like that. I genuinely don't. But I don't really know how to properly layer this down as criticism. It just feels like the actor playing Ezekiel did not know what to do with the materials he was given, and so all of his inflections just feel off. It doesn't make, and quite frankly, combined with all the problems that I had with Ezekiel before, it just makes him not entertaining to watch. Like I said, the only thing appealing to him is the idea of him as an evil Spider-Man. But that's literally all he's got going for him, because quite frankly, he's just not an entertaining villain in any regard beyond that. And ultimately, hell, even as an evil Spider-Man, he starts getting laughable when, as we established, it's clear he didn't get the whole the spider's sixth sense that comes from the spider bite, because 3 times in the movie he gets thrown into cars, and it's hilarious every single time. So In that regard, yes, he's lame. And kind of getting on that same track when it comes to the poor acting, he's not the only one. There are better actors in the movie, but not a lot of them turn in good performances. Let's go to talk about Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Webb. While some of the time her deliveries do work to the character's benefit, other times she really does not feel invested in the material that she's given, and as a result, it really doesn't really do her character any favors. One big scene that I think highlights this the most is the scene where she's having visions of her mother in the past, and she's supposed to have this heartfelt moment where she talks to her mom about how, no, mom, the spider venom worked, I'm cured now, it's okay, it wasn't for nothing, you really loved me. It feels like it should be a lot more of a touching moment, but Dakota Johnson's delivery just does not convey the emotion that the scene should have. And sadly, it's similar throughout the movie. In high stakes situations, she feels a lot more calm than she should be. She doesn't really be feeling like this is an emergency. Now, which you can make the argument that she's so used to these situations that maybe she doesn't get as excited as you would in these scenarios. But ultimately, throughout many points in the movie, it feels like it really doesn't feel like she's turning in a fantastic performance. It really just feels it feels like sometimes she just feels like she's tired. It doesn't really feel like she's fully invested. And it's a similar case with other actors in the movie. Side characters, like with Ben, it doesn't feel like they're really given a lot. It doesn't really feel like the material they're given is doing well for them. And in a similar case, let's talk about the 3 teenagers that would eventually grow up to become Spider-Women. Again, the problem with them isn't their acting. Rather, the problem with them is the writing, which I'll get into why I think the writing with them is a bit of a double-edged sword, but on the side of the sword that hurts you, they are annoying in many cases. These are characters who clearly are meant to be the stereotypical teenage archetypes, and quite frankly, they play the roles a little too well. They can be annoying at times, being very much unruly, just do whatever the hell they want, and yes, it can get on your nerves when they're just actively doing things to sabotage Cassie's attempts to help them, even though they know there's a guy out there in black and red pajamas who will hunt them if he even gets the slightest hint that they're out there in the world, and yet they still do this stupid shit anyway. Hell, even when they're staying with Ben, do you think that they'd be more worried about being hunted by Ezekiel? But no, they're just chilling on a couch watching movies. It doesn't really fit, and it feels tonally off compared to the rest of the movie, and as a result, it just feels a little wonky. Then, of course, there's the editing. There are many times throughout the movie where the editing just feel like where the the shots, the editing just feel quick-paced and all over the map, and it feels very jarring and confusing. Actually, it feels like it's taking you out of the movie, and it doesn't really keep you invested in the story. Hell, when Cassie eventually goes through the whole accident with the car that triggers her spider powers into activating, it feels too soon. It feels like we should have had more time with her before before her superpowers kicked in. So it does still feel rushed. And in that same regard, the effects kind of stink. They look cheesy as fuck. The very first scene when we saw the Las Arañas warriors taking away Cassandra's mom so they could go and give her the spider bite that they thought would heal her, it looks so cheesy. They look fake. I can see the invisible puppet strings is what I'm saying. It just looks so cheesy and fake and crappy. And quite frankly, the rest of the effects of the movie do not help in that regard either. Even the stuff when Cassie's having her visions always feels just weird and iffy for me. And as a result, even the scene where she mastered her power to be in multiple places at once feels just, even when I looked at it, I thought, oh god, that looks lame. It just all looked lame, and I did not care for it. But as such, all these factors combined, I can objectively say that I don't think the film is a good movie. There's a lot wrong with it, and quite frankly, I can see why a lot of people did not care for the movie and why it's being critically panned. But with that said, I do still like it. I legit enjoy this movie. And of course you may be thinking, well, why do you like it? You just listed a bunch of reasons why you think the film doesn't work. Well, yes, but there's also a flip side to all of that. like, let's go back to Cassie as a main character. While there are I feel like Dakota Johnson's acting does not feel like it's hitting the zenith that it should. There are some scenes that I think where I think it actually works to Cassandra's benefit. Because the thing is, Cassandra's character, as we established in the movie, grew up in the foster system. She did not have a family, and the only knowledge that she ever had about who her mother was the notes her mother left behind, and she only knew that her mom died giving birth to her in Peru. She never really knew the full details about it, and her whole life she's been under the impression that her mom prioritized her research over the welfare of her child, not knowing that her mother went through the trip because she wanted to save her child's life. But here's the thing. Well, the thing is, Cassandra, because of how she grew up, is very emotionally detached from everything. Like, she clearly has a conscience, and she clearly wants to help people. But she doesn't know how to talk to people, how to interact with people. Going to the scene where Julia's stepmom got brought to the hospital, and her stepbrother wanted to give Cassie that picture that he drew. Cassie at first was trying to say, "Oh, actually, Ben here did most of the work. You should give it to him." Like, she genuinely has no idea how to talk to people. Even when she talks to Ben, it does feel a little awkward in that regard, and I think it works to the film's benefit because throughout the movie she keeps this same stalwart mindset. While it's clear that she's not an antisocial person, she doesn't really know how to interact with people in a social setting. And I think it actually works to her benefit, and I think it really does work towards the film's benefit with that. And again, Dakota Johnson's acting kind of helps in that regard, as we do get across that this is a person who's just caught between a rock and a hard place, and who doesn't want to be involved in the bigger affairs of the movie, but whose conscience dictates her to do something to help these three girls, because she knows if she doesn't do something, then their deaths may as well be on her head. And we do see in the movie that she does care about people. She does want to help people, otherwise she wouldn't be a paramedic. She wouldn't be working in the field that she is, because she clearly wants to do the right thing. She just doesn't really know how to actually socialize with people. And thus, while she's willing to give you a hand, once you don't need her help anymore, she'll push you away and keep you at arm's length. And that's kind of the character we're given throughout the movie, and that's part of why I like her journey throughout the movie, because once she becomes involved with helping Anya, Julia, and Martha try and survive so they don't get killed by Ezekiel, you see a war between her disinterest and her conscience, as she wants nothing to do with all this. Because here's the thing: until Julia mentioned how Ezekiel seemed to be like a spider person, she never knew that she even had a personal connection with Ezekiel. But her conscience dictated that she needed to do something, because she just couldn't sit back and watch as these girls died. Especially since earlier in the movie she saw her boss die and was powerless to stop it. But now when having these visions of these girls being killed by Ezekiel, it lets her know, okay, I can affect the outcome here. I just need to act in the right way. Sorry. So I do actually like the arc that they give. So I do actually like how they showcase that throughout the movie, and I do like seeing how Cassie starts little by little warming up to the girls and starts being more friendly with them. Starts trying to actively put in more effort towards their safety, and I think it works. I do legitimately like that. Hell, even in some scenes that feel clunky, I feel like that the way that she and other actors portray everything actually shows some legitimately good social chemistry. Going back to a scene where after Julia's stepmom was admitted to the hospital, we have a scene where Cassie and Ben are just in a break room chatting, and it's clunky and awkward, but it also helps really establish how well their dynamic is as friends. That they're able to point these things out about the other person and then just poke fun at them, inciting a reaction, but also showcasing that they have the other's back if they ever need them. And it's legitimately sweet, and I like it. And it does kind of build a nice rapport with them and establishes just kind of what kind of friendship Cassie and Ben have, which ultimately pays off in the end. Which ultimately pays off as the film goes along, as Ben is one of the few people Cassie trusts when she realizes she has to go to Peru and she can't take the girls with her. I like that. I legitimately like that. I legitimately like that. And ultimately, again, it works well to the film's advantage because since Cassie is so socially awkward, when she starts expositing about her terrible relationship with her parent, it feels just as awkward in universe as it does out. The thing is, she starts expositing how she never knew her mom and she grew up in the foster system and how her mom died in childbirth while at the fucking baby shower that's being held for Mary, and surrounded by a bunch of women who want to celebrate Mary giving birth. And as the more she talks, the more you can just see them feeling awkward for her until she finally decides, maybe I should just stop talking. And they try to shift the conversation to another party game about trying to guess what Mary's baby will be named. It's honestly, it works so well. And as a result, it makes Cassandra's arc throughout the movie legitimately interesting. I like seeing her little by little coming to terms with who she is, getting over her traumas and trying to put her best foot forward to help these girls, even as it starts kind of affecting her in a physical sense, especially since, after all, while she has mastered the psychic powers, like as we showcased, Ezekiel can easily kick her ass. So it does make for a legitimately good arc with her, and I did find myself invested in that. And then likewise, in that same regard, the stuff with the stuff with the girls, I legitimately liked. Yes, I'll admit them being written as teenagers could be annoying, but then there comes the flip side to that mindset. Yes, teenagers are dumb, stupid, and tend not to listen to adults just because they think, oh, we're better than everybody, and they always act like they're better than everybody. But by that same token, it really shows how out of their element these three girls are. Like, yes, in the future, they'll be ass-kicking Spider-Woman, fighting supervillains, protecting lives, and standing up for what they believe in. Although I think in the comics, Martha was a villain, but don't quote me on that. But here in the present, these are scared kids with rough lives. They are the only reason that any of them got involved in this at all is because they all happened to be at the right place at the right time, just as this one big bad was hunting them. They have nothing in common. All of them are way in over their heads, and throughout the movie, you see how this is affecting each of them, as none of them really have any idea how to properly register what situation they're put into. And the times when it does register them, they look genuinely scared. And it gives you the impression that these aren't just some random annoying brats who just want to get this over with so they can get back to their pretty lives. These are scared kids who don't know what to do and are relying on Cassie because she's the only one that seems to have even an iota of an idea of what's going on. And even she's kind of clueless at that point. So whether they like it or not, they have to rely on her and each other, which does lead to some legitimately good moments between the girls, as while they do clash throughout the movie, they also start opening up to one another. They start revealing more of their crappy lives, about how their parents are uninvolved and how they don't have anyone in their lives that they can really rely on. And in turn, while this does result in some ribbing, it does also result in some genuinely good bonds being built between these girls. And by the end of the movie, I at least feel like they built up something akin to a friendship. And I do think it actually works to the film's benefit. And I'll even say this, while the costumes for all three Spider-Women plus Madam Web, when we see her in the future, do look cheesy, as a comic fan, I kind of like seeing these hints of the future. I admit it may not come to pass because I know this film is being critically panned, but I would love it if it did. I kind of want to see these characters grow up into these badass spider-themed superheroes. I want to see them kicking ass and doing their own thing. And I admit, and I think that with everything they go through in this movie, I think it's like essentially fire-forged friends. They would stand by one another because they've been through the thick of it, and they know that come hell or high water, they'll have people they can rely on in their corner no matter what happens. And I would love to see that actually continue to be executed in the movies. I would love to see it executed in the movies. I would love to see these characters come together and become the very people that Ezekiel feared that they would be. So I admit there's some excitement there, and combined with the writing of these characters, I would love to see the people they grow up into, because you do see hints of the good people that they want to be. Their relationship with each other do come back together and do feel more legitimate. And yes, while they still come across like annoying teenager archetypes, by that same token, you can tell that there are nuggets of goodness in them. And despite all of this, you can tell that these are very much just kids wanting to do good in the world and not really, or trying to just find their places in the world, but not always succeeding. And that's why it's best that they found each other when they did. So I legit liked that too. And as a result, I like these hints towards the future. And in the case, and ultimately, the thing is, as the story continues along, I do admit, I liked the mystical side of things. I liked seeing Cassandra learning about her powers, figuring out how they worked, the best way to use them. And this kind of brings me back to the editing angle. While from some parts of the movie, the editing can feel choppy and can feel like it can take you out of the movie and the story with how much it jumps around, for Cassandra, the editing really does work, because when you see the visions experienced through her eyes, they're choppy, they repeat themselves, bits and pieces get mixed in with the present, so that Cassandra has absolutely no idea what's real and what isn't until the vision is over. And as a result, it creates a sense of unease as we see all these things through her eyes, and we start feeling confused as to what's going on. We see that she's suffering from the same confusion, which allows us to get an idea of what's going through her head. With one of the best examples being when she saw her boss O'Neill, or when she saw how her boss O'Neill would die, as we see it being interspersed with this guy that she's trying to give CPR to, mixed it and just spliced together with the scenes of her trying to give CPR to the dead O'Neill. That immediately creates a sense of unease as we're seeing it all just mixed together. And then likewise, when we see when things start going back to reality, we have absolutely no idea if what we're seeing is the vision or reality. And as a result, when Cassandra tries doing the right thing, we just get a sense of dread, as we know something bad is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And it just gives a great sense of tension. And likewise, throughout the rest of the movie, as she has these visions and we see these horrible things happening, like when Ezekiel starts killing each of the girls in each of Cassie's visions, it creates even more tension as we know what's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon, and it kind of makes us start rooting for Cassie as we realize, oh shit, you need to act fast. I like that. It's a great way of creating tension, and the way that because of the choppy editing, it actually does well in creating a sense of unease and unease and tension and anxiousness as we know that something bad is going to happen, which in turn makes us root for Cassie more because we want to see her take advantage of this knowledge to change the future and do the right thing. I like that. It works well. And in that same token, while I do still find the effects cheesy, and I admit there are some scenes where they feel off, for other scenes it really does give a sense of, it actually does work to the film's advantage, as it creates a good sense of uncanny valley. As like I said, this makes the characters are just as confused by this otherworldly nature as the audience is, and seeing how they try and make sense of it and interact with it and learn to harness it, it actually does make the journey feel a lot more interesting, especially when we actually start seeing them become a part of this world, like when Cassie has her vision of her mom in the past, or when her powers first activate. I think that was actually really cool, and it was a very trippy scene that really that kind of helps showcase what you're going to be expecting as Cassie starts getting a better grip on her powers. I like that. I think it works, and I like the arc with it. So in essence, while I can objectively say that there is a lot of stuff in the movie that I think holds it back and ultimately makes me say that objectively it's not a good movie, on a personal level, I genuinely like it for all the things that it does right. I like Cassandra Webb's character, and I like the arc that she goes through. I like the writing in several cases especially in how they develop the Cassie and the girls and so forth. I like the setup that we get for potential future movies with these girls revealed to be future Spider-Women, and seeing Cassandra as an actual Madam Web. I like the the uneasy tension we have as Cassie has these visions, which in turn draws us in. I like seeing these characters come together, and I want to see them, and by the end, I do like that they kind of form a little pseudo-family with one another. And ultimately, by the end, I think that all of these things combined do make for a legitimately entertaining movie. I like the main character. I like the writing for the characters. I love the arcs they go through. I like the tension throughout. I love the uncanniness and how it creates a sense of unease. I love and I love the hints towards future movies. All of these things, I think, come together to something that I legitimately enjoyed watching. Hell, when I first saw the movie and I walked out of the theater, I thought to myself, I actually had fun while watching that. And I can still safely say that now. I had fun watching Madam Web. Again, objectively, I do think there's some things wrong with it, but I think the things it does right are enough for me to give this film a thumbs up. I legitimately had fun with this movie, and I admit, while the things that I listed as negative, would probably impact your viewing experience, there is still plenty in there that you can enjoy. And if you can look past all of the grime, there is still a nugget of gold buried in this movie. And I think if you can dig deep enough to find the vein that nugget came from, I think you actually can find a very entertaining movie. There's definitely stuff in there to enjoy, and those things, for me at least, made Madam Web a legitimately enjoyable film that, quite frankly, I can't wait to own on DVD when it eventually comes out. So on the whole, objectively, I don't think Madam Web's a good movie, but on a personal level, I loved it. I enjoyed watching it, and yes, it's everything that everyone says it is, but it is also so much more, and I'm just happy I saw it. I am legitimately glad that I gave Madam Web a chance, and hell, actually another little thing, one of the things that I kind of liked with Madam Web utilizing her psychic powers in a more profound sense, was that she actually was playing to her strengths. She was actually outthinking Ezekiel and not actually fighting him, which, again, works for Madam Web since it still kind of puts her in a support role. So, again, good stuff. I like it. On the whole, I still legitimately enjoy this movie, and if you can find the things I did, then I think you'll enjoy it too. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching, and while next week we'll be going back to our regularly timed Friday night vlogs, as I'll be looking at the Brave Little Toaster, the next time we go back to Sony's side of the MCU, we're going to be checking back in with another Spider-Man villain who is for some reason being turned into an anti-hero with Kraven the Hunter.